everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about video games. I'm your host. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me, we have Josh Torres.
Hello.
Adam Vitale.
Hello.
And Chaomin Wu.
How's it going?
We will see if James decides to join us or not. We'll just tag him in if he shows up. Otherwise, we'll just proceed. We are recording this on February 17th, 2024. We're halfway through a very busy month with a lot of big games looming on the horizon. And we've had a couple pretty sizable releases in the last 7 days. So we're going to be talking about two new games, or actually one new game and one new game DLC at the starting part of this podcast. And then we'll go into some news for some upcoming updates and trailers for the back half of the month and over into March and the rest of the year. So starting out, the RPG new release of this week is Banishers Ghosts of New Eden. We've talked about this, of course, as we've covered it going into its release cycle and eventual release of the game. And without further ado, I'll just hand the proverbial microphone over to Adam to talk about this game. Maybe tee us up again for those that weren't, watching all the trailers line by line about what this game is and your time with it so far. I mean, not so far, you finished it, but you've been covering it for us and wrote up a review for us on this game.
Yeah, so regular listeners of this podcast, if you listen to every episode, first of all, thank you. Last year, ahead of the release of Banishers, which at the time, which was originally scheduled to come out in November before it was delayed, I played Vampire. I played it a few months ahead of time. So these are RPGs from the French studio Don't Nod. And if that name's not familiar to you, this is the studio, they're probably most well known for Life is Strange, the original two games. They didn't do the most recent game, but they were the developers behind the Life is Strange series, the first two published by Square Enix. Before that, they actually developed Remember Me, which I think I saw you playing a long time ago. But in any case,
I don't remember it, but yeah.
Any case, so Vampire was actually one of their earlier games, and that was an action RPG set in like Victorian era London, featuring vampires. And that was actually a pretty big success for them, selling more than 2 million copies in its lifetime. It ended up getting a late Switch port and all that. And so Banishers Ghosts of New Eden is basically the follow-up to that. I'm assuming it's similar staff in the studio and whatnot. I haven't looked deeply into the credits, but it's basic. If you have followed any of Don't Nod's investor relations, financial statements and things like that, they were very pleased with Vampire's success, and they basically have decided we're going to go in on RPGs and these sorts of games because we think these games are successful. And that's basically where Banishers comes from, is a follow-up to Vampire. And I have to imagine this is their biggest budget game yet. And it was delayed from last year and it released last week. Now, Banishers is not it's not as easy of a game to describe as Vampire, where Vampire is just like Vampire RPG. That's all you need to know. Banishers is like Ghost RPG. It's like sort of. So anyways, the premise. This is set in the late 17th century. The main characters in this game are a duo. It's a pair of characters, Red McWraith and Antea Duarte, and they are what are known as Banishers. Their profession is to solve curses, put souls to rest, and even fight the undead, hence Banishers. And they basically get communication from a friend in the New World, across the ocean, in a settlement called New Eden, basically saying there's a curse here and there's some issues and we need you to come basically solve it. Hence the title of the game, Banishers Ghosts of New Eden. And so they head to this place, and the curse there, long story short, is much more severe than they thought it could possibly be. There is in this settlement what is called a nightmare, like the classic nightmare, which is basically a very vengeful ghost haunting the dreams of the people, the settlers. And it's a very dangerous, tangible entity that ultimately ends up killing Antea. She dies. And that's the hook of the game, is that you have two characters, one who's still alive, Red McWraith, and one who is now a ghost. Antea Duarte. And that's more or less the premise of the game in terms of you are a ghost hunter, but now you have become what you have hunted your entire life. And so you basically have two objectives. One, you still have to solve this curse, like what is going on here, and have this settlement back to its non-dangerous ways. And then the other thing is you have to decide what are you going to do with Antea, her ghost. You learn early on that you basically have two options. One, you can go through a sort of heretical ritual to revive her, or let her go on peacefully. And that's basically like what all of your choices in the game sort of anchor on, is what you want to do with Antea's ghost. And so the game itself, after this sort of opening sequence, you basically head off into the world of New Eden, like the settlement and sort of like the outlying areas of the game. And let me put it this way. I come away from this game mixed. There are parts about it that I really like, and there are parts about it that I really don't. And I know that might sound just kind of boring, but I really feel that in this case, that there are things about this game that I think this is excellent, this is really, really good, and this is the reason to play the game. And then there are things that I just kind of honestly don't like at all. I'll start with the positives, then I'll go to the negatives, and then we'll loop back around. So I really like the characters in this game. I really like the dialogue in this game. I really like the NPCs. I like who you meet. I like the voice acting, which is done by Side UK. And everything about like the narrative and the characters and the the storyline, the storytelling, and the kind of the quest stories of this game are all very good, which is maybe not too surprising considering Don't Nod's pedigree, but that was really what I came away from Banishers really high on, was the relationship between your two characters, which I forgot to mention. Not only are they partners in this Banishers business, but they're also lovers. Two, all the NPCs that you meet, they're all very interesting. And how the game is set up is that you are Banishers of ghosts, and when the side quests in this game, the NPCs that you meet, they are referred to as haunting cases. And what that is that you usually have, just by the very nature of this game, you have an NPC that's alive, and then like some NPC that is related to them in some way that is dead, haunting them for some reason. And so one of the things that is on display in pretty much every facet of this game is the relationship between NPCs and this sort of theming about death, about letting go, about life, and the sorts of relationships that people have. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. You have lovers, you have siblings, you have parents and child, you have rivals, you have just people who hate each other, or sisters, or what have you. And just kind of meeting all these characters and how they interact and learning about their regular lives in this settlement. It's all done very well. Now, if you remember when I was talking about Vampire several months ago, this is also one of the things I liked about Vampire, was how the NPC in Vampire specifically, there was sort of like this map or this web of NPC relations and relationships, and learning more about NPC backstories and their characters and whatnot. And that actually, in that game, fed into the games like RPG and EXP and EXP systems, and I really like that. So that sort of translates here in a way. There's no EXP related to this really in terms of like the Vampire systems, of course, but just everything about like meeting the characters and the storylines behind all that is very good. Very memorable characters. But flipping around to what I didn't like about the game, it feels much more typical than Vampire. And what I mean by that is, what are you doing when you're not like talking to NPCs? You're sort of exploring the world, you're uncovering the map. It's sort of this zone-based design, and you're uncovering like chests, you're uncovering little like challenges, like battle challenges to fight waves of enemies. You're finding little totems that give you stat ups. You're finding little like items that can unlock, these specially locked chests. You can find these kind of collectibles throughout the world that go literally into a checklist that you fill out. And this just all felt very typical to me. First of all, I've been talking for a while. Any questions? Or are you guys intently listening?
I have a question
listening.
about the story. You mentioned it early on. First of all, no, I just think you teed that up very well, which is why we're just letting you talk. But
Yeah.
about the decision making between the Antea, the character, one of the two playable protagonists, is Antea. Is you mentioned that you want to make a decision about whether they pass on or whether they're resurrected, and basically, without knowing the framing of that decision, almost always when a story touches upon the topic of resurrection, usually, I'm sure there are specific cases that go the opposite way, but usually resurrection doesn't come at it comes at a great cost. Where usually the best, right, moral, whatever option is to let them pass on. That's the natural course. That's the way things should be. Versus resurrection is amoral. It comes at a cost. It's not right. It's unnatural. And that's not the correct option. Does this game frame it like that, or does it frame it differently? And then what does Antea want? Is she saying, like, please revive me? Or is she saying, please let me go?
Okay. So this is one of the things about the game that I'm more mixed on. So first of all, like the game itself, Antea doesn't really like outwardly say like this is what I want to happen. It's more like a dialogue that you sort of initiate between the two characters, and you basically decide. You have Red make the decision, and then like Antea kind of, I guess, sort of tags along with whatever the decision is. I think that's sort of done intentionally just to make sure, basically say like you can do either option. It's not like you're going against her wishes or anything like that. But so those haunting cases that I mentioned earlier, and again, haunting cases are basically side quests. That's just how side quests are framed in this game. The storylines, the storytelling between the characters are all good and sometimes even moving, but the mechanical like structure of them, I'm a little bit more mixed on. So at the end of every haunting case, you make a decision, like clockwork. So at the end of every haunting case, you basically have two options. This is kind of simplifying it a bit, but you basically can either A, let the ghost of the haunting case, the ghost part of the equation, you can either basically ascend them or banish them, let them basically like, in a nutshell, like stop haunting this living person, you need to pass on now. Or sometimes, in some cases, the person who's still alive is a jerkwad, and basically that is the cause of lingering resentment from the ghost. And so it's like really the living person's fault that the ghost is still around, not the ghost's fault. And so in some cases, you may want to, okay, the ghost, they're not to blame here, the living person is, and you can blame them. Blaming is the framing they use. And that literally kills them. So you can kill people, and that basically lets the ghost
Is it that
move
cut
on.
and dry where you always blame someone results in their death?
Yes. Let me pull up a screenshot while I'm talking here. But you make this decision at the end of every case, and the thing is, and this is what I'm a little bit mixed on, is if you are leaning towards I want Antea to be revived, that ritual requires the death of people. Now, if you want Antea to move on, that ritual doesn't strongly require, but for that ritual, you want to let ghosts pass on, like other ghosts. So what that
hold on. Sorry. I have
No
a
worries.
question on like these options. It's like theoretically, like so you're learning more about the haunting cases to make an informed decision. But say that you're already like committed to like one quote unquote route over the other. Though, would it be like you're just kind of like speed running the case just to get to the decision to make a decision and then
You
moving
basically
on
made what I was going to say for me.
Okay.
In that,
Okay.
that's sort of the issue that I run into here is that, like, let's just say you'd basically decided, all right, I want to revive Antea. So that means I need to kill people. So you get to these people in this haunting case, and you basically have already decided before you even met them, I'm going to kill that guy. And it's just, it sort of in a way like reminds me of like Mass Effect. Now, there's nothing in Mass Effect that says you have to play like this, and same with Banishers. Whereas in Mass Effect, I feel like most people when they play Mass Effect, they're like, you say to yourself, I'm going to play a renegade character or a paragon character. So when you get to those
And there's also
renegade,
benefits too. There's
yeah,
gameplay
when you get to
benefits.
those renegade and paragon options, you aren't actually making a decision in that moment. You're just saying, "Oh, well, I'm going to pick the paragon option because I'm a paragon character," you know. And then
And I want the
that
cool
also ties into
style
like
or
the mechanics of the
skill.
game,
Yeah.
right? So,
Mhm.
here
Yeah.
I'm gonna link a screenshot here. So just kind of
And
give you guys a visual. So like literally at the end of the case, you get a choice between blaming the living person or ascending or banishing the dead
And
person.
for
And
listeners as well, like you can see the screenshot I think this part of your in your review,
yes, it
right?
is.
Like this one. So this
And
the
it
screenshot.
even says in the screenshot, this decision will contribute to Antea's resurrection, since the resurrection ritual will only work if the largest numbers of settlers are sacrificed. So it literally basically says, do this for Route A, do this for Route B. Now, maybe the whole thought process here is to kind of show you the consequences of your decision. Like, if you're going to want to revive Antea, these people have to die. And kind of just showing you this is the consequence of what you decided to do, which is, I don't know, fair. But as far as like the decision making goes, you've kind of already made your decision before you even start the haunting case. Now, again, just sort of like Mass Effect, there's nothing in the game that says you have to be all or nothing. You could just, if in certain cases, just choose individually. Well, I don't. In this case, I'm going to blame the living person because they're an asshole, and in this case, I'm going to, ascend the ghost because they're just they need help passing on from their living bodies. So you could just play it more organically like that, but that's the game is not like framed like that.
It depends on like, is there a gameplay benefit to like committing
Nope.
to like a quote unquote route in this game?
Nope.
So like I think that's the thing with Mass Effect, right? Like
That's true.
people usually committed to a Paragon or Renegade because they saw like like an end of tree skill, or they saw a video of someone using that skill. It's like, hey, that skill looks sick as fuck. I want my character to do that. So they committed to one of those because it would feed experience into getting that skill.
I don't remember if
And
Mass Effect
so,
had like skills tied to uh routes. I think it might have had some equipment.
oh yeah,
Honestly, don't
it might have been
remember.
equipment. Yeah, it might have been that. But it's definitely one of those like weird things of like I guess factoring in part of the equation is like, is there like a tangible gameplay benefit in Banishers? It seems like not.
No.
So you know,
But just this is maybe just where it comes
mhm,
just to personal preference.
yeah.
Like I personally prefer games like off the top of my head, Wasteland 3. Where Wasteland
Hmm.
3 has a lot of choices you make in that game, but you're not like aiming for an ending or anything like that. You're just basically making choices case by case, quest by quest, character by character. Like I want to do this for this character, I want to do this for this person, for this town. Whereas in this game, just the fact that everything is framed as you do this for resurrection, you do this for basically ascension, it never quite worked for me. Just the fact that it's so like uh, signposted in terms of which choice leads to which route, and that's just a preference thing I don't really care for.
Yeah,
But
I understand.
yeah, what I was getting to before we kind of got to this topic about the choices in the game,
Yeah.
which I don't think are terrible. I think it's mixed. And again, I still really like the storytelling of the characters outside of that. Um, the part about the game that I'm most disappointed in is just sort of like outside of the haunting case side quest and outside of the storytelling, like what you're actually doing in the game. Like if you were to open a stream of someone streaming this game, what are they doing? Like what's the most likely thing you're going to see? They're probably going to be exploring a zone, looking for points of interest on the map, and opening like chests and doing little mini puzzles to get like a locked chest open which has a new piece of equipment or something, or maybe there's a little point on the map that summons a few waves of enemies, where if you do that, you can get a little small bonus for that. And this part of the game just felt so like typical to me. Just like exploring the map, checking off the little, there's literally a checklist in the game about like the little things you can do on each map. And that to me just kind of got like boring. And
Hmm.
that was actually a little bit like Vampire, the previous game, didn't really have anything like that. Vampire was more like constrained in the city, more based on like the character relationships and the things like that. Where this game kind of adds that whole exploration part to the game, and I just kind of feel like it is not the game or the developer's strong suit. And that doesn't even get to the combat of the game, which is fine. It's not broken, but it's not great. It's adequate. It's unexciting. The combat in the game is an action RPG. It's similar to Vampire if you played it, in that you have a heavy attack, you have a light attack. There is a parry system in the game, although it was never very satisfying for me. And there's a sort of rhythm you can have in the game where you toggle between the two characters, Antea and Red. And at first, this was promising to me because Red is a typical action RPG character. You have health, you have sort of a stamina where you do your attacks. If you do them in certain orders, you can do different basic combos of the game. And then when you switch to Antea being a ghost doesn't have a health bar. She instead gets it's sort of like a stamina meter. I forget what they call it in game, but how it basically works is this. This is about as much into the weeds as I'll go. When you attack with Red, you fill up Antea's meter, and then when you switch to Red, you drain Antea's meter. So what that means is you're sort of incentivized to toggle between the two characters, filling her meter and draining her meter as you use her, and by switching between the two characters in certain spots, you can do stronger attacks or different combos. And at first I thought, oh, this is kind of interesting.
I'll stop you there and say the way you describe it, that sounds like fundamentally sound. That sounds interesting and kind of like it forces you to switch up. You can't just camp one character.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. But the way you described it sounds good.
Yeah, and it is fine. The thing is, the part that's kind of disappointing to me, there's two parts. One is that rhythm, and there's very, very little progression in the game as far as this goes. A lot of the progression in the game is do slightly more damage with your strong attack, or do slightly more damage with Antea, or take slightly less damage from enemies. And so there's a lot of passive percentages that kind of get altered depending on what you equip and your skill tree in the game. But what your actual combos and things themselves rarely change. So from hour 1 to hour 40, it's about a 40 hour game. The actual change in how you approach battle barely changes. So it kind of just gets stale over time. And what kind of compounds this, and this sounds like a nitpick, but it's honestly one of the biggest issues in the game, I feel, is that this game desperately needed better enemy variety. All right, let me count them. All right, we're counting here. 1, you have your normal specters. There's normal ass specters. 2, you have your fast specters. They're faster. 3, you have your shooty specters. They shoot stuff. Okay, we're at 3 enemies, right? Then you have kind of big versions of each of those. Okay, so it's still basically 3 enemies. Then you have armored versions of 3 of those. Okay, so still basically 3 enemies. Then you have giant specters.
Wait.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, are there big armored ones?
No.
There's big ones and there's armored ones. Are there big Okay,
no.
Go on.
But there is a giant specter, which is a bit different from the big ones. So that's 4. I'm counting, that's 4 enemies. You have specters, fast specters, shooty specters. Then you kind of have 2 different variants on each of those. And then you have the giant specters. And then you have wolves and armored wolves and big wolves. That's really 5 enemy types. And then the only other thing I can say is sometimes those armored specters will have a slightly different weapon. Sometimes they'll have a scythe, a farming scythe, and sometimes they'll have a broadsword. So they're their animations are slightly different. And that's basically what it is, just on its face. So, but you more or less fight them in the same way. And that's basically it as far as regular enemies go. And it just, especially over the course of a 30 to 40 hour game, it just gets really old fighting the same enemies, doing the same combos over and over again. And that kind of combined with this sort of typical exploring the world, checking off your things on the map, with the combat barely changing, the enemies always the same from the beginning to the end, it just kind of got stale. And that's the part of the game I dislike most. And that was actually, it's even more disappointing in a way because those are things that were issues with Vampire also. This if you go back to 2018 and read Kyle's review on the site, Kyle reviewed it for us. He actually said the same thing, that the combat doesn't change much and there's low enemy variety. So the fact that 6 years later I'm basically saying the same things is a little disappointing. I know they're like not set in the same world, so all the assets are new and everything's new, and it's not like they could have just added to it, obviously, but still, it's just it's very disappointing. And this is, I'm going to call it a pet peeve of mine, but I consider this one of the cardinal sins of RPG design, specifically boss design. I really don't care for bosses where the boss design just summons regular enemies, and that is the boss design. I don't care for that design at all. I call it the Mook Squad in my head. That's my headcanon, the Mook Squad, where the boss basically just summons a wave of regular enemies for you to fight, and that's what you do. And I don't mind if maybe like one boss does it, and if it like makes sense for that boss to do it because they're, I don't know, a commander or something. But there's like, I feel like almost every boss in this game has that design where you get a few hits on the boss, and then they basically become like untargetable for a while as you take care of regular enemies for a while. And it just it's reused over and over again. I'm trying to count off the top of my head. There's the beast, there's the cave boss, there's the island boss, there's the void boss. There's bosses? So many bosses that do this, and it just what this sort of tells me is that, like, okay, you designed a combat system, but you didn't design a boss. You just basically just took the combat system you designed and just are substituting that in for a boss fight. Now, I will say that the final boss doesn't do this, and the final boss is probably the best one because of this, or contributed by that. But still, it's just like, I really don't like this Mook Squad boss design, and that's something that Vampire also did. So just these facts that these things that kind of annoyed me about Vampire are also annoying me here, maybe even more so, is just kind of disappointing. What were you saying?
Now, are the mooks the same variety of creatures that you just went over?
Yep.
Or are they
the
like
specters, the wolves,
okay,
the giant specter sometimes? Yep.
Are the bosses summoning the mooks unique at least?
Some of them are. Some of them are just like, one of the bosses is basically like the armored specter but bigger. I mean, that's a little bit reductive, but it's, they're just a big armored specter with a weapon, and they are the boss themselves that you fight here and there is relatively unique, but they do spend much of their fight just summoning the regular guys that you have to take care of first. I think you actually saw me stream this boss, Brian. There's like a boss in the cave that's like a really big, like, chain to the wall specter.
Oh, and I remember that one was in one of the trailers, and it's good imagery. Like, it's a good design. It's kind of a fun boss.
So that boss is kind of half and half, where like that boss will very occasionally like shoot like waves of like ghost dust at you, or like slam their big hand down on the battlefield that you got to avoid. But that boss also spends a lot of their time just summoning specters to basically pester you, and it's just kind of, I don't know, it just feels like a crutch to me. Now, again, maybe you're totally fine with this sort of boss design, but I just think this over-reliance on it is just annoying to me. But, so again, I guess, wrapping up here maybe, more or less that's my takeaway. I really like this game's characters and story. There's actually a moment in the game on the island between characters, their names are Seeker and Ceridian, that I think are really nice. And just judging by other reviews of this game, it seems like sometimes, when we do reviews, sometimes you feel like you're on an island with your opinion, but it seems like a lot of people are really fond of like the characters and the storytelling in this game, and that is what I would call the strong suit, or the reason to play. It's just that in a way, the game itself, it's more polished than Vampire. It looks better than Vampire. It's probably less glitchy than Vampire. It's probably Don't Nod's most expensive game. But I almost feel like it's more traditional, more typical, and in a way that's actually a little bit more disappointing than Vampire, which felt more unique. I like the storytelling. The combat is kind of fine if stale and stagnant, and the world design is typical. And so I have some mixed thoughts about how the questing and the choice and consequence works. I'll say this: apparently, there are 5 endings to this game. That's from Don't Nod themselves. Now, I can kind of think of 3 endings off the top of my head. 1, revive Antea. 2, let Antea go. 3, I presume there's an ending if you try to revive her, but you didn't do it properly. Now, I'll just say, I got when I played through the game, I got the revive and the ascend ending. I did some save manipulation and got both. So I saw both of those endings. I'm assuming there's a failure ending. I'm guessing. I'm actually not sure what the other two would be, according to like Don't Nods. They say they have 5. I don't know if it's maybe just like a slight variation depending on something. But I just wanted to mention that because maybe there is something a little bit more nuanced that I didn't see, that wasn't evident to me, and how the quests were handled and how it, signposts, this leads to revival, this leads to ascension. So maybe there's a bit more to it that I'm missing. But if there is, it's not, extremely evident.
I don't know, I don't know anything about the endings, but in my mind, I feel like one of those endings are like you yourself become a ghost with your ghost wife, and you guys do ghost things together.
We're not going to revive you, but I'm not going to live without you. Okay.
Yeah, this might kind of tie into that, but one thing I was wondering was, you mentioned during the haunting episodes where if you blame the person, that helps with one of the endings. But if you don't blame the person, does that really help with the
No.
let her go on ending? It's kind of like one's a positive thing, like, or positive in terms of like you gain progress towards an ending, where the other one is just kind of like the lack of progress, so therefore you're pushing yourself towards the other
So
ending.
you almost feel like to hedge your bets, like, well, I'm just going to kill everyone, and then I can still pick either ending.
Yeah, kind of. That's exactly what I was saying. It's like, if you want her to go on, you don't have to pick the option where you don't blame them. You can just say, "Please go on."
And
Yeah,
maybe,
so maybe there
and
is
maybe we're
something
approaching
interesting
this
there about the 5
maybe we're
endings.
approaching this incorrectly, where you don't have to be so hyper focused on the ending, but that's just kind of how the game frames itself, like literally
Well,
from
like,
the onset and in like the literal dialogue choices you pick. So it's hard not
and
to.
like you showed us, like the UI basically says like this will result with progress towards this ending, like very clearly, explicitly stated to you.
Yeah.
So that's in the front of your mind when you're making the choice. You're not thinking about what story did I just witness? What are these characters presented to me over the last? Let me assume a side quest takes 20 minutes, 30 minutes to do. Like, okay, instead of just making a decision here, the game has a thumbnail that says this choice does A and this choice does B. Which choice do you want to make? And obviously we can obviously put our blinders on and say, well, I'm going to make the choice that I would make truly role play here, and to hell with whatever the consequences are. But it takes a little bit of fortitude to do that, especially when the game presents itself so explicitly in the other direction. But so, in short, you've really enjoyed your time with it, but with some just drawbacks where you were hoping it would come together a little better.
My suggestion, if you're playing this game, if you decide to play it, is to like honestly just put it on an easier difficulty, because I don't the gameplay is not really the highlight, and don't try to like exhaust the maps. Like, you're just filling out a checklist. Just do the character quests, like do the main story. Just play through it that way, because I think that's where you're gonna get the most out of this game. I know I didn't give like any examples of the different like relationships between characters, but to be honest, I don't really want to like say any of them because they're sort of like spoilers, and I probably couldn't do it justice to how they're like presented in the game. But like some of the character like relationships and NPCs that you meet, and basically the problems that they have both in their relationship and just being like settlers of this new world. Um, it's just very well written. There's actually I'll be vague here. There's a scene near the end of the game in like the 4th region of the game where you are okay. I'll maybe give some details here. There's actually one more thing I want to mention. Now that I think about it, it's actually a very important thing. Anyways, I'm rambling. Near the end of the game, in one of the last regions of the game, you meet someone who calls himself a demonologist, and long story short, you realize that they're just not a very good person, and you have the choice to basically off them because they are kind of a dick. And there's actually like this scene in the game in like this old like chapel where Red McWraith, your main character, is basically just outlining this guy's basically his crimes and what he did and all that, and it's like cathartic in that moment where he's basically like, you did this, you are an ass, blah blah blah, and it's just kind of like, hell yeah. And like, it's rare to get you a game to like get you excited or amped up in moments like that. And that's just kind of just a very vague example of just like, I think the game's storytelling and character writing is all very good. Now, one more thing, this is the important thing that I just brought up, that I really, really, really appreciate about this game is like the overall narrative. the curse, the nightmare. Like, what is that? I talked about, reviving Antea, sort of like one of the things you have to decide. But the other thing that you're figuring out here is this curse. Like, where did it come from? What is it about? How do you solve it? And this curse kind of slowly kind of materializes and comes into focus as you do these different quests throughout the game. And you realize, I'm not going to spoil it, like, where did it stem from? Why did it happen? Who is basically responsible for it? And how do you solve it? And what I like about it is that it stays relatively constrained. One thing that I kind of don't like about a lot of RPGs, Japanese or Western or whatever, is that I feel like a lot of games, the scale of things or the scope of things just escalates and escalates and escalates, sometimes to like the fate of a nation or the fate of a world, world-altering stakes. But that's not the case here. One thing I like about this game is that the curse is just for the settlement of New Eden. And what you learn about what happened here is just basically an event that happened within this settlement. It's not like a gigantic, great, omnipresent evil or anything like that. It's just, the results of actions and characters in this place. And the narrative stays constrained, but believable. And like, I just really like its restraint on its scope and how it resolves. And it stays like relatively low key in the end. And Vampire is similar here too. And I appreciate that. I just appreciate that. It reminds me of games I played last year, like, this is a very weird comparison, like Kodelka. It takes place just in one mansion, relatively constrained, just with one conflict here in one place. It kind of reminds me of that. And I really, really like how this game approaches that and resolves that. And that's where I'll leave it.
Well,
I don't want to say more than that.
I'm saying this as a person who does not write for a living, so this is my like layman's kind of consumerist viewpoint. But writing a small scale story like that just seems like it would be inherently far more difficult and require a much greater degree of like skill, or maybe a different sort of skill. I'll frame it like that, because when it's a world altering stake, it's kind of straightforward to put yourself in a position where you have motivation for why you're doing what you're doing, because you're saving the world or you're saving a person or something like that. Where if it's a smaller scale stake, you've really got to have a lot of strong character writing to kind of motivate to see it through to the end in that way. And I think of like Disco Elysium, and not maybe the
Right.
perfect
Disco's,
comparison, but
that's
when I
also
think
a
of
very
like,
good point, or a very good example.
yeah, so and that just seems like I've not played Vampire, but I did play Remember Me, and even though my memories of that are foggy, one of that sort of story is tailored to the studio's strengths. So it's kind of cool to see that it has been manifested here as well, and kind of presented you a story that you don't see in a lot of other RPGs, at least not the big scale ones. So no,
I could
that's a cool
easily
shout out
see
there. Yeah.
cynical people getting to the end of the game and saying, "That's it," and my response to that would be like, "Yeah, that's it." Like, that's the conflict, and I just think it's well done
Mhm,
the way that they approach it.
mhm.
So
No, that's a fun little recount of that. But thank you, Adam, for going over your time and impressions for Banishers, Ghosts of New Eden. We do have Adam's written review up on the site, as well as you have a handful of kind of some guide checklisty type
yeah,
things
all
he's
the
up on the site as
collectibles,
well.
all the checklisty stuff. That's the stuff I
Yeah.
don't really
I thought you
like,
were
but I
missing
wrote up
two
guides for
things.
it. I'm missing two
You're
things.
like, I suggest not doing this, but
Hey, I had
if
to
you
write
want
it
to
for
do it,
guide purposes, okay?
there you go. And we're going to go on to our second game of our game talk section here. But before we do that, we'll just say welcome to the podcast, James.
It happened again.
Yeah, no worries.
Don't worry, I did the same. I did the same. I closed
Mhm.
down Astlibra and I look at the time. I was like, oh shit.
Astlibra.
Yeah, that's the game we're talking about next, Chow. Very
Segue.
great
Good
segue.
job.
So we talked about either last week or the week before. We got the release date. I think it was last week for the Astlibra DLC,
Mhm.
which has a subtitle that I'm forgetting.
Astlibra,
Phantom
Gaiden, The
Mist.
Cave of Phantom Mist. The title.
Mhm. So I know that Chow is clearly spending a lot of time playing this new add-on for Astlibra, and I know Adam's played it a little bit as well. I know Josh is also interested. Have you started it yet? Or no?
I've started it, but I'm not like too far in yet because I've been doing other stuff. But I have a good grasp of like what's going on in it as well.
All right. So so it sounds like we've got three people here who at least can have some level of input on their time so far with the new Astlibra content. But we'll hand it off starting out over to Chow, since you were up so late playing it. Kind of tee us up for what this is and what you've been enjoying or not enjoying about it so far.
So this is supposed to be a side story that takes place somewhere in the middle of the game. Basically, the heroes from the original game, they basically went on this quest to find like herbs or something, and they went to this cave of Phantom Mist and went missing. And you, as the baker's daughter, it's like, my sister's sick. She needs that medicine, like now. And suddenly monsters start to attack the town for some reason because the hero still hasn't come back. And then she's suddenly able to kill the monster, and the dog, Poland, which is a character that you meet pretty early in the original game, but in the original timeline, the dog is dead. And later on, there's a timeline where the dog is alive. Anyways, it's that timeline, and the dog is like, "Hey, you can hear me?" It's like, I think we're connected somehow.
I like
It's
how
like,
Poland introduces himself. He's like, "Hi, I'm a dog."
yeah, it's like I'm a talking dog.
Very,
It's
very
like every
straightforward.
time when you meet someone, it's like, this is nothing to be suspicious, anyways. Okay, I'm just a talking dog. Okay.
I guess that for people who are interested in the base game of Astlibra revision, like just note that there might be light spoilers that we're going to mention here and there because it's hard to talk about this DLC without at least talking a little bit about the base game as well.
The game even says, but when you start up the DLC, it even says like explicitly this might have spoilers for the main game.
Yeah.
So this
But-
DLC you're expected to play after.
Yeah.
But I don't feel it's too heavy a spoiler.
No, it's
because I
not.
can't
It's
really
just like-
mention anything
yeah.
without it.
Yeah, there's a talking
it's
dog.
So, anyways, we were trying to find the heroes by going into this cave of Phantom Mist, which is kind of like this premise of this game, right? Plot is pretty paper thin, but if there is plot, I actually do like whatever plot that is in this game. It's like, that is definitely an Astlibra moment right there, and you're like, yep.
So I guess like to kind of provide context, like the structure of this DLC is very 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 different from like how the base game is. Like the base game is a pretty linear narrative adventure, very story driven. You're going to different places constantly in the base game, while in this DLC, the only real place that you're going to is this cave of Phantom Mist, but it's structured in a way that's more like a roguelite or roguelike. That and there's it kind of expands on the idea of like something happens very late in Astlibra Revision where it kind of has this light mode of this roguelike mode in the DLC where you kind of venture to different stratums, and in this DLC your level is reset every time you enter it, so you have to level up again in it. While in the base game you were able to just like traverse all your progress and no level wipes, stuff like so. It takes that concept from the base game and really expands and fleshes it out with different systems and character progression systems in this DLC.
I don't think your stats gain like that much from leveling ups, in my opinion, right? So the whole roguelike is that you gather force crystals, which is from like killing enemies, like, and that is used for that kind of like a dungeon crawler looking, like seer grid looking thing from the original game. And
Yeah.
but to access it, you have to go back home. So you have like this risk and reward thing. It's like, should I keep pushing it? But if I get killed, I lose everything. Or, well, if you play on lower difficulties, you don't lose everything. But I play on hell, so you lose all your force crystals, and there goes all your progress, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
it's like I play on hell because that's kind of like, oh, like I'm familiar
yeah,
with the original
and,
game, so
and,
I'm
and,
sticking with hell, right?
and in terms of like how like wow, and just to like emphasize like there is a little bit of story here, but like the story is more about character interactions more so than like uh an epic world changing tale of like things are happening in the world. It's not really. It's more of a smaller scope thing, where you kind of learn more about who the baker's daughter is because you didn't really see her much in the base game. Very teased, but not really. You don't really meet her in that game, and you get a little bit more, learn more about like kind of the weird intricacies about her family. Um, a very very early game example that kind of shows like kind of the spirit of Astlibra in general is like how goofy this game is. The like Chow mentioned earlier, the kind of one of the core reasons you're exploring this cave of Phantom Mist is your little sister is sick. She's bedridden, and uh eventually when you like beat like one of the early bosses as you traverse down this cave, you come back and like your sickly little sister becomes a shopkeeper where you can buy skill scrolls to earn new actions, and you can also buy various equipment that you can use like range projectiles. For example, like she's like one of the first interactions you have with her when she opens up the shop here is like you can buy like the handy things here like scrolls, blah blah blah, and even a shotgun. You're like, wait, what? Like what do you sell? So you go scroll to the bottom of the list, and sure enough, she sells crossbows, guns, shotguns, and you're like, all right, I
Yeah,
guess.
you get a trophy for buying that pistol from your sister.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
why does your sister have a gun?
I don't know. She just has. And
Okay,
yeah,
the scroll makes sense. She said that the hero gave her the scrolls, but the
yeah,
guns? Where the hell did
yeah. I
the
don't
guns
know.
come from?
Yeah, and it's very goofy like that. Like and then a little bit later on, your other family members start becoming like shopkeepers. Like normally, we know you used to like you help around the house and you were getting this for free, but now since you're actually like you have to go out, you're off to do something. We have to make some money back, so we're gonna start charging you for like food, here around here, okay? And you're like,
There's no
fine.
discount either. It's fucking full price.
Yeah.
What kind of family's that? It's like, hey, want some cookies? It's $10. It's like, wait, that's more than Walmart.
Yeah, but I think I'll pass this off to you, Adam, in terms of like progression on the Cave of Phantoms. It's a kind of like remixed biome levels from the original game. Like as you're traveling down, like you're kind of going through like the Astlibra hero's memories. So
Yeah,
a lot of the
so
places that you're exploring, you've seen before in the base game, but remixed.
so this is a roguelike mode. Like no edging
Mhm.
around it. This is a
Yeah,
roguelike mode of Astalibra. Now, the thing is Astalibra, we talked about it several times already. Chow mentioned it in his review. One of the best parts about Astalibra, at least in my opinion, are like its progression systems, and like you always feel like you're getting stronger, getting better equipment, getting new skills, getting new magic, getting new abilities. It has the growth system that's like really unique, and it's just no game is quite like Astalibra in that regard. And I think that's one of Astalibra's strongest suits. And so when you take all of that and you shove it into a roguelike mode, it actually works out really damn well, to be honest. And not only that, but it makes a couple of fun little twists on and alterations on like how you progress through your character through these modes. So you're not really gaining experience like levels anymore because you always reset to level 1 like you would in any roguelike, but you are still powering up your stats through skills and stuff. One of the new systems, for instance, I always forget what it's called in the game. I think it's called Styles,
yeah.
and that's basically like a class system, which sort of affects your it affects your stat loadout as well as usually includes some like passive bonus. It usually has to do with it's all very numbers based. Like if you're like one of the classes is swordswoman, which basically makes swords like half as heavy, which that actually can mean a lot of things depending on your strength and speed stats in terms of how many hits you're getting in per swing and whatnot. Um, it's really good for like numbers nerds like us, to be honest. And so there's some really cool systems there that you're always progressing through, and these sorts of wrinkles in the like the structure of the game and the progression systems and all that. These are the sorts of things I like to see in a DLC. I'll make the strange comparison. You may know where I'm going with this already, but a couple months ago I reviewed the DLC expansion for Tales of Arise. Sorry, I know that was kind of out of nowhere, maybe, but like
The Beyond the Dawn
Beyond the
one,
Dawn.
right? Yeah.
One thing I said about that and reviewed about that and said on this podcast is one thing I didn't like about that DLC was that it just was no different whatsoever from the base game. Not at all. Just the same mechanics, same everything, no wrinkle, no gimmick, no alteration, no addition, no nothing. Whereas this is like a new structure, completely roguelike with new mechanics, new systems, kind of tied in with all the old progression systems, and it makes it cool. It has like an interesting twist to it, an interesting wrinkle. You're not. It is that roguelike structure where like the rooms are sort of randomized. You're kind of finding loot and whatnot. There's a new luxury, or there's a new like uh, what's the word I'm thinking of with Moiku, the pig guy. You can like
The got
gamble.
Shopkeeper.
Yeah, the luxury tickets or whatever they are to get.
it's like the gachapon system, but it's
Yeah,
kind of more expanded.
yeah, and
in
he will
this.
never give me the grand prize, that jerk pig.
Sorry, I
But
got them
anyways,
all.
But yeah, anyways, my point is that I like, generally speaking, these sorts of expansions that take some mechanic or idea or structure from the original game and just, rotate it a bit, twist it a bit, alter it a bit, add something, and it's cool.
Yeah, and I also really
So-
like the part of like the first. I really like the map, how they draw the maps in this game, like where
It's
like
very
different.
classic.
Yeah, it's very classic. It's very easy to read, of like color coded. This room links to this room, so you always know like the way back, because the it has like really helpful colored lines of like where each like room goes, where you've already explored it or if you haven't. And also, there's like mini game rooms where like sometimes you'll go into a room and it's just like colored balls, and you just like hit them for a limited amount of time to get like crystals for the grow system. Or like another one is like a target practice range, where like if you hit these targets, you'll get treasure chests. And there's just like very like little distractions to kind of break up like ongoing battles. It's like, oh, I can do this thing here to kind of get some minor rewards. It's just like it's a nice different change of pace that you'll sometimes run across too. It's like, oh, that's cool. It's fun.
I was gonna say the crossbow. You get the crossbow to do the target practicing. That's the best when it comes in terms of rewards. Again,
Yeah,
it took a while to get the bow for me. So like the first time I got to that room, it's like, oh, what can I do? I don't have a bow. Just throw arrows at the balloons.
I didn't have a bow of either, so I was like, oh, I just have to throw arrows here. It's also this DLC is, you can tell it's definitely geared for like Astlibra veterans, because like the average challenge level in this DLC is like it feels a substantially a step higher than the
I actually
base
think
game.
it's easier than the base game. Because
You
I
think?
think that, yeah, I actually think it's a lot easier than the base game. But the thing I was struggling the most was like the arena challenges. Because
Yeah, I
Well,
think that some of the arenas are
I think we're
tough.
missing
Yeah.
some context here. Chao is being very humble, and he's not telling
Oh
everyone that he's
yeah,
playing on the hell difficulty.
it's like,
yeah. You're on difficulty, and you're doing berserk build, so you're not like doing a
And
normal playthrough.
meanwhile, wimpy old me is on normal.
And
yeah,
and also you're playing like not on Berserk, right? So for
No,
context, Berserk gamers and Astlibra are very they're the dangerous type of people. They equip this Berserk trait, and they do triple the amount of damage, but they can die in one hit. But to bypass that, they equip another trait where they can, when they enter like a new map or thing, they can get hit once for free, and then everything else is fair game. So that's their lifestyle. They're free to do what they want, but like for normal people, it might feel more difficult because of the way that it kind of designs
a high
the design
risk, high
philosophy.
reward, baby. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay. So basically, the reason the reason why I say this game is a lot easier than the base game is because I feel like this character, the Baker's daughter, has way better abilities than the original main character. You get magic. Magic is so OP in this. This main character, let's say you're not using Berserk, right? You can heal, which you can save up a lot of healing consumable items in this game because you don't need to, oh, I get hit. Time to use a healing item like the original. Here it's just like, oh, I could just use a healing spell and just slowly regen all my HP. And then the magic is so good, you could hit the full screen and you get like invincibility where you can actually see the shield. While in the original, the main character had to use possession, which is like they transform into like some kind of creature to do the magic spell, and that invincibility barrier is kind of hard to see. But here you could actually like have a good timing on like when your invincibility barrier is gone, right? So I feel like it's easier than the base game. That's for me, right?
yeah, okay, yeah. That like I haven't gone far enough for it. Like I saw all like I know like one of the early crazy magic abilities, like the wind cutter one, goes like it's an omnidirectional one. I definitely started like I'm using invincibility frames on that once I unlocked it. So I probably just need to unlock better magic spells to kind of get a better feel. But
Like I,
from the get go, when you start like doing early arena, it'll feel more challenging because you're like kind of you don't have all the tools that like you might want for those.
I think they cranked up the stats of the bosses that you see from Arena. Like for example, like the third boss from the original game. Oh
Yeah.
man, I did not struggle with that at all in the original game. I feel like I just melted that boss, right? But here it's like it takes forever to get through the heads to fight the real form. So I don't know. It's like they just cranked up the stat because they find that boss was underwhelming in original or something. But it's like that.
So in terms of how this game, like how long is it? Did you finish this, Chow?
I did not, but this is a dense package. I would believe it's probably about 25 hours long. I found a secret boss yesterday, and you kind of like instantly know where it is from being in the original game because later on in the end game, if you beat all like the hardest arena challenges, you get like all these equipment, and every time there's equipment, you mastered it, you get a piece of key item. It's like, oh, this is a key, this is a goblin tablet, this is a rope. It's like, what the hell is this for? And you're like, if you play the original, you already know what is that used for, where that secret room is, and you go there, and there's a secret boss there. So
Yeah,
I feel like this is a very tense package, right?
yeah. I mean, it's like a great deal too. Like it's like what, $10, and you get a lot of content out of
Like
it.
this
Like the
actually
original.
feels like a 1.5 game. It's like it's the base game with new twists, and you
Mhm.
get more than what you pay for. It's like this is an awesome deal.
And I think there's also like like a main story like end to it, and I think there's like a post game as well. I believe.
Yes, basically when you end like the base game, then they always say, "Oh, this takes place somewhere in between." It's like we recommend that you beat the original game before you go further, or else you might get spoiled. Then after that, it'll take place after the main game, after the original, and you're like, "Oh,
Oh, that's interesting. So there's like there's even like a sequel elements to it, I guess,
yeah,
because there'll be events that happen after everything's
yeah."
done in the base game. Okay, interesting.
So you meet like some characters that you never even get to meet in the original, and it's like, who are these people? And I'm curious where they go, but like, I think this DLC is about 25 hours long, 12 for like just the base game, and probably 25 you're like a completionist that wants everything because I love this game. You know, everybody that I recommend this to all went for the platinum from the original. Like, oh, it's like I'll try this out. They get addicted to it. Next thing you know, they get the platinum trophy, you know, or equivalent to a platinum trophy in
Yeah,
Steam.
I was gonna say I'm not. I didn't know this was available on PlayStation.
Oh, no,
It is
it's
not.
only available now on PC, and the only other platform that Astlibra Revision has been released to is Nintendo Switch. But this Cave of Phantom Mist DLC is going to come to Switch later, so it's not out there now. It'll come sometime in the near future. Um, but yeah, I mean, for people who wanted to play more Astlibra, this is a very good package. I'm sure people who wanted more Astlibra already probably got the DLC. Like, it's interesting because this game has like found its own success as well. Like, since the release of the Cave of Phantomus DLC, the Astlibra has reached a new 24-hour concurrent peak on Steam, thanks to the DLC. And just to provide context, to access the DLC, you set it as like a launch option from the base game. So any time or players that like boot up the game, it would feed into like what Steam charts would consider as the main game. So even if they're playing as DLC, that still all feeds into the same number on Steam charts because it's still using that same library entry of Acid Libra revision. So it seems like it's off to a great start. People seem to, have nothing but great things to say about it as long as they know that it's a roguelike structure and not thrown off being like, oh, is there a bug that like my level keeps getting reset? It's like, oh no, that's not a bug. And that's great. It's really cool to I still really look back fondly on like my interview with Keizo, the developer of Astlibra, and it's really great to see that he's been finding once again more success with this DLC and seeing it like this DLC was like a mini side story DLC before like in the original version of Astlibra, but now like he like kind of filled it out in really smart ways to like really provide a more full complete package that like you really feel like you're getting your money's worth out of it, and that's great. It's great. So it's cool to see it's finding success in its own way.
And I should know this, but I don't. But when is this coming out on Switch?
But there's no release date for the DLC's release date yet on Switch. As to the revision is already out on Switch now, but the DLC there's no release date for it.
Gotcha.
I was just gonna say, there's only like one nitpick I have with this game. They need
Mhm.
more costumes. It's like, okay, so one of the things about this game is that the main character, when she changes her armor, she doesn't change her appearance, right? She only wears shoulder pads. That's her only armor, right? Shoulder pads, shield, and your sword, right? And she can buy costumes from this one shopkeeper, the one that sells dresses in the original game. Like in the original game, it doesn't sell anything to that main character from what I recall, right? But here you get to buy costumes and stuff, and all the costumes is just like characters that you know from the original game, just to switch to what they wear, right?
Mhm.
So I wish there was like a little bit more costumes to play around with, but it's like, yeah, I guess that is what it is, I guess, right?
I mean, if it's between making a better game versus better costumes, I'll take the better gameplay over more costumes and anything. But who knows? Once again, case like Astlibra is mostly a solo indie dev game with
Yeah,
some
I
with some
don't really
outsourcing.
expect much, but it's like, $8. This is more than what I bargained for. This is the greatest deal in history. Okay.
The greatest deal in history. um, yeah.
It reminds me of like those
Podcast
Muramasa
title.
DLCs. When the DLC is like so worth it that you just like, I don't know what you call those kind of DLCs. Like a very good package.
The greatest deal in history.
All right, there we go.
But yeah, you guys have anything more to say about the Cave of Phantomus? I think that I'm still, making my way through it. I've been getting sidetracked by other stuff. I do want to play it more.
I think that covers it. I think.
Yeah.
All right. The third game that we have listed to talk about here is a late edition that James put on the list. And it's a game that we talked about. It's kind of surprise announcement port a week or two ago, and that is the original Dragon Quest Builders going to PC. So, James, you put up a quick written preview up on the site talking about the PC release, but
Well,
if you want to
not a preview, but yeah, I did put out like a feature kind of talking about the PC version and whatnot. Not a full review, though I did put like 15, 20 hours into it, and I've played the game before. So I guess what I'll say is that if you've never played Dragon Quest Builders 1, this is the best way of playing it. It's really, really weird it took this long for it to come out on PC, considering what its inspiration is. It's just very weird that it took
I
this
guess to
long.
provide context, right? Like for a long time now, the sequel Dragon Quest Builders 2 released on PC several years ago, and it's just now that like the first game is finally out on PC out of nowhere. Like it's like almost like a surprise announcement of like, oh, you're going back and releasing the first game. That's cool for archival purposes. That's also weird because by and large the general sentiment is 2 is just the better game all over, hands down. Too.
And it is. It's like if you want something that's more like a proper Dragon Quest game, then Builders 2 is definitely the better one to go to. And Builders 1 is still probably worth playing, but it's also like very hard to kind of justify it if you've already played 2. Just because it's like, yeah.
To me, this mostly feels like just Square Enix just being like, let's just put another one of our catalog games on Steam. I'm going to guess they probably didn't have excellent high expectations for its performance in terms of like sales and whatnot. But I guess they just took an opportunity like, hey, we could port this game, so why not? I mean,
Yeah,
the timing isn't ideal at all, but
it's just so weird to me because it's like like looking at historical data, I can understand why out of all of like Square Enix's franchises, Dragon Quest, like, but very specifically Dragon Quest spin-offs are like the main thing that Square Enix will eventually port to PC, like no matter what. I remember that Dragon Quest Heroes 1, I don't think, was it 1 or 2 that didn't get ported? I know like one of them got ported to PC and then the other one didn't. But some really important context is that a lot of these, like these days, a lot of the time, like Square Enix doesn't release their games day and date with PC.
It looks like both Heroes games are on PC.
Oh, they are?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I'm not sure if one was a later port then, but it's like, that's the thing with Square Enix is that sometimes we're so inconsistent on when games will come to PC. So sometimes, like, how many people outside of this podcast know that Neo The World Ends With You is available on Steam? Like, every time I bring up that game came out on Steam and like peaked at like just a bit above like 200 concurrent players, people are like, wait, it's on PC? Which is wild because, like, if you look back, like, historically, Dragon Quest XI's localization released day and date on PC, and did incredible numbers for the time. Like peaked at like 11,000 players, which 6 years ago when that game first came out in America, like in the West, that like peak concurrent players was way bigger than if you had a game that hit that number now, because Steam itself has gotten so much bigger. And it's just, I'm glad this game got ported, but it feels like something that should have happened even before Builders 2 got ported. It should have happened in like 2018, 2019. Just
You
so
know,
weird.
oddly enough, Chow, I don't know if I'm crazy. I probably am, but whenever I think of Dragon Quest Builders, I think about all the staff members from the Builders team that went over to the Type Moon Studio BB. That was back like in 2019, and like they have yet to like ship a game. They're still working on
I totally remember that story.
Yeah.
You told me that many times ago. I was like, oh, they're going to go there. It's like, they must be doing something big. But where is this game?
Yeah, they're still working
Let's not
on
forget
that
that,
extra remake.
what's his name? Kazuya Nino?
Yeah, Kazuya Nino.
He was also basically in a sense, I don't know if this is an exaggeration or not, but he was instrumental in like the very first Etrian Odyssey games.
Yes,
So,
yeah. Yeah. So and like even beyond, because you had like the scenario writer for both Builders games also joined Studio BB, who was Koya Tsukada, sorry. And then you had the art director on like Builders 2, Yoshikazu Takinouchi, also joined Type Moon Studio B. It's like a lot of like key individuals from the Builders team like kind of just went over to Type Moon Studio BB, and then we have yet to, we're still waiting for them to cook with this Fate Extra remake that's been MIA for how many years now? We're just waiting.
Didn't we just recently get some more information for it though?
They showed like a teaser for it like late last year. It was like maybe barely 10 to 15 seconds, like basically saying we're still working on this game. It's like cool. It's like very late last year or like very early this year, something like that. It's like they're still working. Yeah, that's fine.
You say teaser, but they did show at least like some in-engine like footage or something, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so very very like early on in development, they showed like very like early prototype footage, and I was like, it's still very much in development, and then the little teaser thing in a tweet was like the most recent thing that we saw of it. So it's not like the entire project is like dead in the water. They're still clearly working on it. It's just like, man, I really wish we like saw something like officially new, like a new trailer or a new like anything of like just new info about the game, because I'm really looking forward to like seeing what they do with it, because Fate Extra is a very divisive game. Some people really like it. Some people say it's the worst game ever. So I'm really interested to see what the remake does for it.
And that also covers all of our article shoutouts by the two games that we talked about at the start of the podcast here. We've got the Banishers review and the Dragon Quest Builders PC kind of look in for that release up on the website at rpgsite.net. Did we ever have any other games we wanted to talk about before we go into the news slate?
Not at the moment. Stay tuned, I guess.
Yeah, stay tuned. It's a busy couple weeks. I mean, it's been a busy couple weeks, but that's going to continue at that pace for a while. The main headline here, I'm sure most people listening to this is aware, but it's something we've been kind of looking forward to and expecting a date and announcement anytime, and we finally got it. And that is that NIS America has formally announced that the worldwide release of East 10 Nordics, it'll be releasing in North America and Europe this fall for PlayStation 4 and 5, Nintendo Switch, and PC. And alongside of this, they gave us an announcement trailer and a press release about describing the game. Of course, the game has been out in Japan since last September, so those who have followed Japanese media or potentially imported it themselves kind of know what the package is and what we're looking at. But obviously, NIS America is divulging the information as if this is a brand new title that no one's seen before. But yeah, we finally got a date coming out this fall. Not a specific date, but we know it'll be out this year.
I have two comments.
Okay, go for it.
One, if you go to wishlist this game on Steam, make sure you get the right version. Two, to explain, Clouded Leopard's also releasing this on Steam a little earlier than NIS America is. That version won't have English, so don't wishlist that version. It probably won't be as good of a port either. because
yeah.
the Steam port is being handled by PH3, which is Durante, who's done a lot of these ports, and they're excellent. 2, this will be roughly a year turnaround, which is actually fast for
Yeah, I
Falco,
mean,
relatively.
it's one of those things. It's one of those. It's like yes, it was expected for it to get a Western release eventually, but like I think the surprise thing is like it's relatively a fast turnaround because people are expecting this after like say like Kuro no Kiseki 2, like because if they're to follow like the timeline of uh like release dates or releases from Falcom in Japan, like this would come out, theoretically after Kuro no Kiseki 2 in the
I
West.
I expected this before Kuro. Well, I didn't fully expect this before Kuro 2, but I definitely saw a situation like this being possible just because I know that like inside like NIS America, they have 2 separate teams working. Like they basically have a dedicated Trails team, and then like East is like not necessarily the same people. So it
I think for this, I think it's for the average fan who like follows this. It's like this is a nice surprise for them, and that's cool for them. But like, yes, that you can look forward to this like way earlier than what you probably may have thought based on like, if
I
they
don't
were.
think they're gonna copy that now. Use a business tactic again, right? Where they sell the Japanese version early, and you can just wait for the English patch later, right?
Kuro
if
is
they-
doing
it-
that, but
yeah,
it seems like they
it-
won't do that because there is no Steam Japanese version of East. So
yeah, apparently the reason why they're not doing that is because for visibility on Steam, unless you like marked the Japanese version as like early access, and then when the game fully released, you marked it as like coming out of early access, it messes with the Steam like new and trending algorithm. So for like Nayuta, I do understand that it made it so that the game had much less reach organically on Steam than if they had just released it directly in English. So it sounds
The Yuno is like the experiment that went horribly wrong.
well,
For
they're
that
continuing
structure.
that with Kuro, or at least
Yeah,
they're
they already
that.
committed. Yeah, they committed to that with Kuro 1, so they're locked into that. So the, you could probably expect abysmal like PC sales for Kuro 1 later this year as well because it's not like people are actively avoiding. It's like they don't fucking know that it's out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it helps. I mean, like some of the things, like this is like a different example, but when it comes to like writing the guides I do, it's like the one of the reasons why it always remains like a top in the chart is because it's always listed on the tops, right? If it's gone from that list, the numbers would drastically lower.
Yeah,
because-
if you're not at least like visible on like Steam's front page for like a day, people won't know that you're actually out. That's kind of the reality of it. People don't. A lot of people don't look any further than the Steam front page of like what games are out. And why should they? To be honest.
Yeah, they're not gonna go dig out for it, but they'll be like curious, like, "Oh, this is trending." It's like, "What is this?" And they're like, "Oh,
Anyways,
Yeah.
we've talked about East 10 a lot. James has even basically reviewed it. That it's, the action RPG, no party system, maybe a little bit more of the character action stylings between the 2 characters. I hear a lot of good things about it. I know James was maybe one of the things that he was not so hot on is maybe like environmental variety, but otherwise, seems like it's a pretty solid time. Looking forward to it.
Yep.
Hopefully the PC
Yeah.
port is good.
Hopefully it releases in a pretty good time frame where it's not too close to like say things like Metaphor, for example. Hopefully we don't get like this weird
Yeah.
situation where like things are clumped together again.
The other announcement that we have, which is also about East, I think I might hand this off to Adam because he just did a lot of research, kind of explaining this, and you kind of dug in and put all the facts together. Tell me about the original East, Adam. East 1, Ancient East Vanished.
Okay, so I don't know how to about this. You might have heard of Project Egg. No? Okay, so Project Egg is a kind of an initiative from a Japanese publisher called D4 Enterprises. And what they do is they basically license or get licensing rights to a bunch of very old Japanese retro games. Like we're talking like 80s and 90s era Japanese RPGs and other games. And they have various emulators that you can basically buy these games through from D4's website and play them. It's only in Japanese. Like this is for like Japanese audiences. Of course, anyone can buy them, but I guess I was on their website earlier today. They have more than 1,000 titles you can buy through this Project Egg. I don't know if that's exaggerated or in any way, but they say more than 1,000.
Wait, you could buy 1,000 of these titles on the Switch, though?
No, I was getting to that.
Um,
So the Project
yeah.
Egg is a PC download thing. Now, the Switch version of Project Egg is called Egg Console. Got it? The Switch version of Project Egg is called Egg Console. Okay. So Egg Console.
You're like tapping your like desk. It's like I got it. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Egg Console is a basically the Switch version of this publisher's basically catalog, and they actually just recently started putting out these games onto Switch. And kind of the interesting thing here is that these are on the American and Western storefronts with English descriptions and English titles and everything, and you can buy them.
It's
right
like
now,
the closest to like a virtual console.
yes,
Pretty much.
So the way I framed it in our news post is the original Ys 1 Ancient Ys Vanished is now available for Nintendo Switch eShop via the Egg Console PC88 emulator. So it is an emulator, which a lot of these virtual console digital games are in a sense. And so what that means is this game, this original version of Ys, never released in English. The version of Ys that did come out in English came out a few years later, and that was for the PC Engine version, not the PC88 version. So this is the original Ys, and what that means is the game itself is in Japanese. So it's effectively like a digital import. You're buying a Japanese game to play, but like some of the how-to stuff in the emulator itself and some of the supporting materials, those will be in English, but the game itself is in Japanese. But you can buy it with American dollars for I think it's $6.49 on Switch right now. You can buy the original Ys and play it in Japanese. This is the 9th. There are 9 games. So I said before there are 1,000 through this Project Egg service. There are currently 9 on Switch, at least on the English storefront. I don't know if there's disparity between storefronts, but at least on the English storefront, there are 9 games you can buy right now. And these only just started like last October, so it's only been a few months. Like the Highlight is on there. Another game from Falcom is on there, and that's the original Xanadu. You can buy it, the PC88 version. Again, it's a Japanese game, Japanese text. It's got some English text in it also, just by happenstance, but you can buy it and you can play it right now.
I love that with the Xanadu thing that brought Sakurai coming out to basically tweet saying, "Yeah, I was the 8th person in the world to beat the original Xanadu." It's like, dude, how do you keep getting even more cool?
Yeah,
that guy has like the biggest flex card.
Yeah, dude, like you think you're good at video games, you're nothing compared to Sakurai, dude.
Anyways, I just think this whole concept is cool. Like, hey,
yes,
some company just decided, this isn't Falcom putting it up there. Obviously, Falcom gave them permission. Like, hey, take our old game, run it through your emulator, and they even have some like you can even I think you can even like flip through some of like the original like scans of the manual, which is pretty cool.
cool.
And like play it right now for less than for the price of lunch or whatever. You can buy the original Xanadu or Ys 1 and play it right now in Japanese. I actually did buy
Nowadays,
this
it's like
and I
Apple One.
played it very briefly. Now, in my mind, so I played Ys Book not too long ago, well, a couple years ago, which is the PC Engine version, which that's also an old game. That came out in 1990, I think, in English. And I actually like that version a lot. And I got to remind myself, oh yeah, this version here is even older than that by a few years.
Yeah.
The original PC88 version of Ys. And it's just the first Ys. It's not Ys 1 and 2. A lot of those games are almost always connected nowadays, but this is just the first game. But
yeah, I'm looking at the D for Enterprise like a lot like entry in the eShop, and like they have the 9 titles there in the actual American eShop.
Yeah.
And like and this initiative like is fairly recent. They started doing this at around October of last year.
Yeah.
With the release of Relics. So it's kind of like I really hope they really go for it and start like bringing like a load of these of their library that they were able to store on PC into like this Switch eShop ecosystem, and like and the goal, ideally somehow somewhere deals are made for them to start like kind of releasing these on Steam as well, which would be really fucking cool too.
There's 2 games I probably really want on here. I want Valis 2, and then the other one I want is Emerald Dragon. I want to try the
I played that
PC.
like last or 2 years ago.
Yeah, but you played the PC engine version. You didn't play the
Oh.
PC 98 version.
Yeah, the PC-88 is like such a treasure trove. So I mean, I hope this initiative starts like rolling out into like even more platforms beyond the eShop. But
Yeah.
also like the prospect of like turning my Switch into just like a PC-88 emulator heaven is also kind of
Because I hate using
tempting
PC
too.
98 emulators, to be honest with you. And if this is
Mhm.
like a streamlined experience of using it, I'll
Oh
take
yeah,
it.
oh
Because when
yeah,
you use it on the like your actual PC, it's like now the game's too fast because you set the game to 30 hertz. So you have to change it to like 16 hertz, and you're like, wait, this is too slow. It's like, what is the correct speed for this game? You're not quite sure because you never played the original or something. Right?
right. Yeah, I hear that shit gets finicky.
And it's like, oh, it's like if it's a more streamlined experience to get these games, I'll pay whatever.
And these are
I'll do it.
these are pretty agreeable prices too, at least for US. This is like 649 as we mentioned for these titles, and that's not too bad.
And I remember Virtual Console years ago had a few just like digital imports as well, and I just thought that was always just cool, like a
Yeah,
storefront. And I know like on old PlayStation Network, you could buy like the Japanese PlayStation games and play them with an English account, but you'd have to like make a Japanese account to get them.
Yeah, I
Um,
did that.
yeah,
There
I
was
mean, I
one
did
time
that
they had
too.
like the entire catalog.
I was actually just testing out literally last night. Literally last night, I was actually checking out something on my PlayStation 3. Still have it hooked up. But you had to create a whole separate account to get it, and probably get like a Japanese PSN card or whatever. But just the fact that this is just on the American eShop and you can just buy it with, I literally bought it with my PayPal funds. It's just very convenient. So I like it.
I hope more companies do the same. The PS5 could use more classics.
So yeah, we'll see what they. I probably won't play East One to completion, uh, but I messed around with it a bit, and it's just really cool to just to have that available and accessible.
I think
So,
I think there was also like I think the Yeast 2 has a more conclusive ending in the original version. On the PC 88 version, you get to see Adel kissing his love interest
oh, that's
under
the
a
only.
tree.
Is that what makes it conclusive?
I think so.
Okay,
Now he's not off to adventures, being shipwrecked all the time.
I was about to say like, wait, does East Two not have a conclusive ending? Oh, it depends on if he kisses Lilia or not. Okay.
More conclusive, okay?
Those are it for like the major announcements of the week. We have a couple games that have upcoming games that have new updates and trailers as they go into their release windows. The first one is back to one of the major March releases, Unicorn Overlord. Atlas and Vanillaware have been kind of leapfrogging like written newsletters and then these video Yosef's training guides. So this week we kind of had one new of each. The new Yosef video is called I said Joseph. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. Joseph's Guide to Training. And what this basically is last week we talked about how there was a newsletter talking about promotion, stages, EXP training, those sorts of things in a written form. And now we basically have a 3-minute kind of in-universe session where Joseph is training the main character about what this looks like. So it talks about promotion. It talks about how you have a currency called honors, which is used to promote characters that you earn from quests. It talks about how you have like a little bit of the itemization in terms of items that give EXP, items that boost stats, things like that. It also talks about, and again, this is if it sounds like repeat, it's because it is because a lot of this was covered in written form prior. But those who want the visual aid can kind of get more of it here on the video. And they did talk about how there are repeatable stages called auxiliary stages so that you don't need to worry about a limited EXP pool if you want to use multiple characters or change out your approach or whatever. You can always do the auxiliary stages to get training or items or treatises or things like that. And then it looks like there's going to be one more Joseph training video in the upcoming weeks about battles, which will likely recap what the written newsletter for this week was, which was tactics, priority, battle stages, etc. It talked a little bit about how the overworld map and how that is like traversed and the real time aspect of moving characters along the map and engaging in battle. Talks about how engaging in battle will use stamina. Talks about how you use valor as kind of an in battle currency to deploy units and use skills and how basically there's like a gambit system, which I know we've already made that comparison because it showed up earlier. But there's a cool little gambit system about how characters will use either active or passive abilities based on how you prioritize their tactics, which seems like it could always be neat, but almost essential in this game based on how they're framing it, in that your
I
characters
mean,
will not
yeah,
use
you have to use it, or
abilities.
else,
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess people need to understand this is not like I've probably hammered this in before of like, this is not your typical vanillaware game where it's not like Muramasa or Odin Spear. It's not like you're actively inputting button inputs in the middle of combat to execute moves. It's not like a real time action game where you execute moves in a side scroller fashion like those games. There's a game where you have to like pre-configure your unit's commands, so when battle starts, they will execute these commands. And so you're like putting if then statements. So, like for example, one example is given is like if you put a you input a healing spell at like the top of a unit's priority list, because it executes down by priority. So the highest command that you give them is the most prioritized, and then the subsequent commands are lesser prioritized as the lower you go. So if you put a healing spell at the top, the very first thing they're gonna put for is a healing spell. Okay, I will only do a healing spell if like a allied player unit is like less than 50%, because you pre-configured that. So if it'll check for that, okay, if an ally has less than 50% HP, I will cast a healing spell because they are low on health. And then the next thing they'll do is like, okay, what's the next thing I do? Oh, it says to go use this skill on this enemy with this certain HP threshold if you configured that. And then after that, it's like, okay, what do I do next after that? So it very much battles play out automatically. Because of how you configured that unit's command list already. So you're programming it much like you said a gambit system. So it's not like some people may still be under the impression that like this is like a real time action game, which is it's not. It's not. That's just the reality of it.
I also kind of realize when I say Gambit system, I kind of have this idea that everyone knows what I mean. But a Gambit system
Yeah,
was a system in Final Fantasy 12, and it's been used both prior and since in different names, but colloquially Gambit system, where it's a series of basically if then statements for characters will take specific actions in a specific order of priority depending on conditions being met. So when I say Gambit system, that's what I'm specifically referring to. But yeah.
and I think this is really going to be fun to mess around with because there's so many like different class types and different specialties of like what each of these classes excel in. So there's going to be a large, wide variety of tactics that'll be open to you, and it's kind of like up to you to figure out exactly how you want to configure squads and what sort of like class compositions you want a squad to form and how they synergize with one another based on their commands used. Of course, like there's an optimize button, like that'll feel overwhelming, but since I have brain rot, I have to like configure everything manually, so I'll do that. Um, but I think a lot of like what people really liked about this update is like the some of the new characters shown, like a good majority of them were from non-human races. Like, there's a lot of beast characters shown. Like you have Morard, who's like a big buff lion dude who has his chest out, has a gigantic axe. And then you have like Dina, who's like you've seen this character before in screenshots, where it's like a huntress, like a fox girl with a spear. And then the talk of the town apparently is this sophisticated owl lady named Ramona, who wields a staff, is like a chiefess of the owl bloodline, who wears glasses, and is just like that's cool, That's a great design for like a fantasy setting. She is clearly bumping it. It's great.
But yeah, it looks like before release, we'll at least get one more video talking about. It'll be cool to see the battle description and tactics in a video format, even if
Yeah.
the Joseph's training kind of distills it down a bit. But we'll at least have that, and then it'll release not like 2 weeks into March, right? Is it March 8th?
March 8th, yeah. So yeah,
Yeah,
we're about 3 weeks out for it.
Mhm.
It's just around the corner. It'll sneak up.
And a few outlets were able to go hands-on. We don't have one on our website, but we'll just shout out our friends at RPG Fan. They've got a hands-on preview for Unicorn Overlord over at their site, so go check it out. The other game that we have an update for is a late February release that's coming out in just like 10 days or so, and this is Shiren the Wanderer Mystery Dungeon of Serpentcoil Island. They've been doing a handful of these releases, just kind of doling out new little gameplay updates and little dossiers on individual monsters. So the gameplay update here is a little bit more simple. It's talking about using a peach bun to transform into a monster. Can you transform into a monster in any of the other games, or is this new to this entry? I haven't played any of the other games, so I was hoping James
I
or
don't
Adam could.
remember if you can. I don't think so, unless I'm misremembering. I'm pretty sure you couldn't, unless it was like in a much earlier Shiren.
Yeah.
And then the monsters that they show here are they have one called the Hoppin' Batter, which is like a cricket with a cricket bat, is how I wearing samurai armor. That's how I'm
Yeah.
interpreting this, which is kind of fun.
That's that's a fun way to describe it. Yes.
And then a group of enemies that are like Power Rangers. They're like ninjas
Hell
with really
yeah.
coordinated outfits, or Axum Rangers.
I love whenever like a RPG kind of gives a nod to like Super Sentai stuff in a really fun
Mhm.
way. So
And then there's a chicken family where you have like buff four-armed hens and little chicklets. But yeah,
mhm.
just some fun monster illustrations and things like that, and a few details about
Well, one thing I can
digital
actually,
pre-order.
it's funny
Go ahead.
because during the preview event, those aren't two separate monsters for the chickens. No, basically, once you deal enough damage to the big chicken, then they shrink to the little chicken and try and run away.
It's kind of fun. Well, that explains why it's a single piece of artwork then. Yeah. And that kind of covers it for game updates. So a little bit thin this week, but we have a lot of upcoming dates, so we'll go through that. Before we go into the dates, here's one thing that I think was all but confirmed until the last couple of days, where it was confirmed, and that is that Granblue Fantasy Relink has joined the many RPGs of the first part of the year to hit 1 million units sold. Of course, Granblue Fantasy Relink being on PlayStation 5 and PC. So obviously a big success. We've already talked about how it already has like outpaced most other Japanese published RPGs on the platform. I forget like where we ended up leaving that off. Like it was above Dark Souls but below Elden Ring. Is kind of like where it ended up, but still did very well on platform. Did very well overall, selling 1 million copies and having a good uh, critic review as well as just like word of mouth. Just seems to be a big success for side games.
Yeah, Granblue Relink is. I've mentioned it before, but it's like one of my favorite modern success stories in the industry, like modern industry. It's just it's an incredible like just debut from that Side Games Osaka team, and just to see it like thrive, like it's a game. It's like no one knew how well the game was gonna do at all. It was a total question mark, like because of how long it was in development. It's just like you don't really see many projects like reach this level of success after like a very complicated development cycle. So and they basically had to start from scratch after they separated from Platinum Games, and like they used some of the core foundations that Platinum Games laid out, but for the most part they built that game again from the ground up, and and as they were doing it they had to form a new development team, so they were like recruiting people as they were developing the game too, which is incredibly difficult to do, I imagine.
I Yes, but I think maybe important context is that Side Games Osaka is literally like 10 minutes away from Platinum's office, and a lot of the people in the credits listed under Side Games Osaka used to work at Platinum. So I don't think
Here's the thing: even if you had like the range of that, they were still recruiting people mid development. It's not just like a straight, oh, okay, we got your people, and then we can all work
yeah, yeah,
together very
yeah.
well.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that it wasn't as extreme of a shift as I think people believe it was, just based off of the full context. That's all I'm saying.
It
I
was
don't
an
know
8
what
out of 10 extreme rather than 10 out of 10 extreme.
I don't know what that. I don't know exactly what that means. I'll be honest. I don't know how to interpret that. I'll like, especially when you think about like the credits of Relink and like how there was no mention of Platinum Games at all, and there was no Platinum Games logo. I think the development of Relink is kind of spelled out. Like the story of Relink is in those credits. When you think about the names and you think about what's credited in that, I think a lot of the game's development is kind of illuminated if you're able to read between the lines, the credits of that game. So I don't know exactly how to interpret what you just said, but to me, I praise them because it's an incredibly tough process to tough that out and come out and be as successful as they were from the get go,
Yeah,
especially in this
I'm
system
glad for
nowadays.
it too because
Uh-huh.
I'm just tired of everything being like in a mobile game. It's like it needs some kind of thing to outreach its audience, and this is tool to it, I would say. The other thing I want to say is, do you remember Project Awakening? Do you remember
I
that
do,
side
yeah.
games that show
Uh-huh.
that thing? What do you think that's going to happen now to that thing? Do you think we're going to see some of that maybe
I
in the
don't know. That's the thing. Like they made
Doesn't it have a name now? I
I
forget.
was
no.
trying to look this up. So it was
I don't think
originally
so.
shown in 2018. Then it went silent until 2021 when they showed it again. It was still Project Awakening at that time. I don't know if it's been seen since. I don't remember.
Oh yeah, for
Yeah,
some reason I was thinking like it got a new name or a new product, but no, I must have been thinking something else. It's still Project Awakening.
yeah. I don't know where that is. It's still supposedly it's still in development, but I have no idea. I also know that
I
like
have one normie question.
yeah,
The mobile game is available in English, but not officially in the West. Is that kind of where that's at?
They
yeah. So
basically translate the entire game into English for their Southeast Asia fans, which is kind of like Malaysia.
to kind of so to put it in plain terms, yeah, yes, like you can access the game. You can access the game anywhere in the world because it's a browser game. You can just like input a link into your browser and you can play the game because it's just all through your browser. And there's an English text option that you can use that you can access within that browser game to turn all the text into English. So, but there's no like official release of it in the West. In terms of like it's not in the App Store for Apple or Google Play or anything like that. And all those things are just basically interfaces with the mobile game. They're not like a separate APK thing.
Yeah,
It's
you're
not like
just playing a fucking web page browser game. That's really it. It is the strongest suit, and it's also its weakest link. Weakest link
yeah.
being like it's spaghetti code because it's all in browser, so the code's like full of limitations. It's like how the game works. It's kind of like buggy. It's kind of music kind of loops all over the place. But because it's also a browser game, you could play it on like any device. You could probably play on your toaster or your fridge because I've seen someone play it on the fridge.
It's also a unique way to play the game because like when you think about browser games, you think about like the Java Shockwave days. I know a lot of people on Relink like actually have like dedicated like bookmark tabs for like every single menu in that game
Yep, they
to
basically
quickly
would
access it.
press on like a bookmark to go to a boss instantly or something like
Yeah,
that. And because it's a browser game, you can hit the refresh button, which is a lot of people do. They hit the refresh button and they skip all the animations. Like, oh, that 2 minutes of animation, skipped it, and now I get to the next turn. I can do DPS more faster, which is
yeah.
kind of like how you play the mobile game. And one of the funniest thing is like the voice actor Yuichi Nakamura, who is actually like a very big whale and loves playing the gotcha game. And I think one time the producers asked him to like demonstrate this new boss, and he just kept hitting refreshing the panel. And
That's
the
awesome.
producers like kind of tap his shoulders, like, "Can you stop doing that? We're trying to show off our game here." I was like, "Oh, sorry, but this is how I play."
That's so good.
So it's
Um,
like, yeah, this is kind of like a problem with Granblue is because everyone just keep refreshing and they don't know what the fuck killed them. They don't want to steal animation, right?
yeah. No. So it's interesting to see where they're going to go, where they'll go, especially with the ongoing support of Relink. So congratulations to the director Kaji, producer Fukuhara, and Side Games America CEO Okubo on the success, along with development team. Because I think once again, this is nowhere near guaranteed at all. This is definitely by even before release. It's like I don't know
Yeah,
about
they
this.
were pretty tame on those DLCs. Like, there was only like two little things coming, but now it's kind of like, oh, this is this hit. So there was probably a lot more things going on their way now.
Yeah, so we'll see.
Yeah, pretty hyped about it.
Yeah, that's great. I'm Relink has made me a Granblue fan, not of the browser game, but like I just like the Relink. I'm a Granblue fan in that respect. Somehow, it made a miracle happen.
All right, the rest of the podcast, we're going to go through some dates. We have a date that's relatively short upcoming. The upcoming release for the Thaumaturge was originally planned to release on February 20th, so just within this next upcoming week. The team at Fool's Theory, who we've brought up at a couple times in the last couple podcasts, just needs a little bit of extra time for polish, and they've decided to, or actually, they've specifically call out a better release window and taking February's busy launch period into account. So they're moving the Thaumaturge from February 20th back to March 4th.
It's you know, it's hard to release a game right now. It's a very crowded time frame, so hopefully March 4th is a better time frame. It's kind of in a weird situation now where originally this game was going to release before FF7 Rebirth. Now it's going to release after it, and now it's like releasing in that period between FF7 Rebirth and Unicorn Overlord. Not necessarily that like the target audiences will like overlap with each other, because this seems to be like a very targeting a different type of like, I don't know, RPG player. But still, like for people who like RPGs, it's just like, I don't know. I hope it does well, you know.
Well, with a game like F7 Rebirth, in a lot of spaces, I won't say all of them, but a lot of spaces, it will crowd out other discussion, even if it's not quite like an apples to apples comparison for genre of game.
Yeah,
Just in
because
ter just in terms of, like, YouTube front page, Steam front page. Well, the Steam
exactly,
is a
it's like
specific case, but
like especially like in March 4th, like, you know, you'll still get like a ton of like FF7 Rebirth stuff. So I don't know. Hopefully, this game doesn't get totally like forgotten by the wayside when it releases, I guess.
also releasing in early March, we've got a release date for Blade Prince Academy coming out on PC. It was originally announced back in last summer, June 2023, and then it had a successful Kickstarter campaign shortly thereafter. Also coming out in March, we got a release date for Outward, its port over to Nintendo Switch. This game released on PC back in 2019, and then late last year, it eventually made its way to consoles with its definitive edition. And then late last year, the studio at Nine Dots said that they were going to bring Outward to Switch in 2024. And now we just know that that date is March 28th. I did play this one. It's pretty fun, but again, just crowded time of the year. We have another April release coming up. This is a Gothic horror RPG called Withering Rooms. Now, this one has been on Steam in early access since October of 2022, with it seems generally positive reviews, not overwhelmingly so, but mostly positive. And then it'll also, on April 2nd, release its console versions for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series.
I think this is a really like interesting looking game. It's like a side scroller action RPG, and has like a pretty like heavy emphasis on like builds for your character, because the you're going around this procedurally generated Victorian mansion, and the developer has been very active in like giving updates to like the status of the game. Like I even linked its like news page on Steam on like all the additions. And for context, like the developer and publisher Moonless Formless, that's a solo indie dev run. So this is hopefully gonna find its own success when it releases. And kind of like, I think about like Astlibra, you know, Keizo being a solo indie dev that like outsourced some, or had collaborated with some of the creators like Shigetake for like the art on the portraits, but like the core gameplay systems, that was all Keizo. So hopefully this game will like be like warmly received when it receives a full release, because I think the game actually looks really cool from the screenshots and like seeing the game in action in the trailer. Like I think this is I might like definitely give it a shot. I don't know if it's like on release day, but I'm definitely more interested in like, you know, giving this game a try.
Its art style gives me like a little bit of early Resident Evil vibes. Not
Hmm.
not quite the same because this is like a side scroller, but a little bit of it.
Hmm.
We do have one delay out of April. We're going to see Neptunia Sisters versus Sisters. Its Xbox release was going to be on April 16th, and now it has been moved to May 21st. This is just said to ensure that the Xbox platform launches smoothly. So we'll have a May release for that. And I think that kind of covers us for release dates, unless I missed anything here.
I
So
think
obviously, an already packed couple of months going ahead, and then just a few additions and shifts arounds there. Before we close out the podcast, we do have one other news that hit our social feeds and all of our feeds over the last week, and that is the unfortunate passing of the Eiyuden Chronicle scenario writer Yoshitaka Murayama, obviously kind of the Suikoden founder, did pass away on February 6th. So produced Suikoden 1 and 2, did some initial of the writing of Suikoden 3. Obviously, kind of was going to be heading up the spiritual successor in Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, but unfortunately did pass away earlier this month.
Yeah, and decided, due ongoing complications with ongoing illness. I know, and it's incredibly unfortunate and very sad. This guy, for people who are fans of Japanese RPGs, is a legend. When you think about the first two Suikoden games, he was, you know, kind of the mastermind behind it in terms of the story behind those games. Especially Suikoden 2, very, very beloved entry in Suikoden. He had headed that up. And whenever I thought about Murayama, when I first heard this news earlier this week, I think about the original Kickstarter campaign video of Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, and like just being psyched about being able to get the opportunity to produce a successor to a series that he really, really loved. And by all accounts, that Kickstarter campaign years ago for Eiyuden Chronicle broke records. It was an incredibly successful Kickstarter campaign. Um, that just
And
I
that Kickstarter campaign is also what basically was proved the desire for these sorts of games that allowed the Kickstarters for the Penny Blood and Arm Fantasia to take place a couple
Right.
years later. Basically,
Mhm.
other Japanese creators from these classic franchises basically saying, "Hey, there's demand for this. People want these sorts of things." So
It even like spurred Konami. I'm sure it factored into some extent. It spurred Konami to embark on this HD remaster for Suikoden 1 and 2 as well.
yeah,
Um,
it's the timing is so incredibly unfortunate. I just like
yeah,
he won't get to see his new game release or the remasters of his classics coming out. Like,
yeah, and you just now it's just like kind of like putting it into a different perspective. Like when if you plan on playing Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes and the Suikoden 1 and 2 HD remasters, like you now it's hard to now that you like know this news and like the creator has passed away before being able to like witness like the reception to these games that he's worked on. So for me, like when I play them this year, I'm going into it like in a way that like I feel like I have to like honor his memory. Not to say peer pressured, but like looking at it like in that perspective, in that light of like, okay, like what was like his vision for Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, for example. What did he want to achieve with this title? Sort of like a reverence to like work. I think that's like kind of like the best way to honor his memory is like even if you end up disliking it, you should. I'm sure he would still like be like please like give my game a try. That's what I think about it as. Like it's not like you're being peer pressured to like it, but at least give it a shot and see if it's for you.
And hopefully the team over at 505 Games, calls that out and like gives them like a special call out for that, in the memory of um,
Yeah.
Yoshitaka
So
Murayama.
very heartbreaking news. I
It's
mean,
honestly, yeah, I
Yeah.
imagine it's like a pretty like stressful time for Rabbit and Bear Studios because Murayama was the head of that studio as well. So on top of like shipping this upcoming RPG, they also have to think about like man, obviously staff changes and how who's the successor of that studio now? How is that studio gonna like move forward from? Um, best of luck to everyone that it involved. Obviously, not only just at Rabbit and Bear Studios and 505 Games, but also to the people who knew and loved Murayama from his personal life as well.
And then, of course, for many of us, Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes is one that is circled on our calendar for an April release. So you can definitely bet on us giving that game a very good look in once it releases in just
Yeah,
a couple months.
yeah.
And with that, we have reached the end of our planned itinerary for this episode of the Tetracast. So you can find the Banishers Ghosts of New Eden review, as well as the guide work that Adam has done, up on the website, rpgsite.net. We also have James's Dragon Quest Builders PC look-in up on the site as well. Of course, all the upcoming, recent releases, including Like a Dragon, Persona, everything. We all have recent guides and note sheets up on the website for those as well as all the news posts that we talked about. You should join our Discord at discord.gg/RPG site. You can find RPG site on all the social media networks. You should be able to just type in RPG site and you should be able to find us. And we'll be back next week with another episode of the Tetracast. Let me look at our RPG list to kind of look ahead and see what we might be talking about. So
The Tetracast?
Tetracast, yes.
Mhm.
As an procrastinating.
So February 24th, you should be able to talk about I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Shiren won't be quite out yet. Final
Have
Fantasy
I
is the week
updated
after
that list to have Thaumaturge delayed? I forget.
Yes.
Okay. Because that was coming
So
out.
we got
Yeah,
nothing we can talk about next week.
Yeah, it would have been Thaumaturge, but it got delayed. You know. Maybe I should, I don't know. Maybe I should give Last Epoch a shot. I'm not sure.
Maybe I should just give my backlog a shot.
No.
There you
You,
go.
Right, it's
Brian,
time
you
to
need to
talk
play
about old
Vandaltail.
games.
You're our League of Legends expert now.
That's true.
Apparently Paige is not well. We'll see. Maybe we'll get Paige on to talk about it. Timing there is going to be difficult with the time zone difference. But yeah, Vandaltail is coming out on the 21st. But yeah, until you hear from us next time, stay safe and take care. And we'll talk to y'all later.